Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for Bins&Bytes for having me. Today, I want to talk with you about from real world to real time and the journey I had from real world filmmaking to, digital filmmaking. So, this is what we're going to talk about today. It seems quite a lot, but I'm sure we'll get through it. And in the end, we have a nice Q&A. So if you have any questions, note them and write them down, and we can discuss them later. But first things first, who am I? Well, if you look at movies and everything I do professionally, everything starts with El Mariachi and Desperado. Because when I was 16, I got this disc, and it was very funny double-sided disc. And I wanted to get Desperado because, I don't know, someone recommended it to me. But on the other end, it was El Mariachi and the 10-minute film school. And at the sweet age of 16, I learned that making movies can be done in a way, without millions of budget. So that's what I try to do. So my life in short, I'm a senior cinematic artist for Hunt. I worked 10 years as a filmmaker and commercial director. I worked for 7 years as a screenwriter. I directed 2 feature films, roughly 17 short films. I directed more than 100 commercials, and ultimately, I'm a storyteller by heart. So this is some of the movies I did you probably never saw. And as you can see, I was very much into pointing at stuff. Before I joined Crytek, I was one step away from hell, or other call it directing rom-coms while being drunk. But why do I tell you that? Well, today I want to tell you what I learned from my journey of doing indie movies and now being a cinematic artist. So, let's go. Real world versus animated film. So, if you're on a set and doing a real world movie, you're constantly fighting for more possibilities. You want more money, you want more daylight, you want more shooting days, you want more cameras, you want more everything. You push the limits, you push the day, you shoot for, 18 hours, and it just goes forever, and you just try to squeeze as much as possible out of the day. In digital films, like the trailers I do, it's the opposite. We have to limit ourselves because nothing is stopping us. Nothing is stopping us from overdoing, doing too much. This can be a problem too. So my first rule, so to say, is stick to your rules. And what I mean by that, if you watch great directors like Joseph Kosinski, who never ever uses a handheld camera and always goes with his tripod or Steadicam or whatever, then you have Peter Berg, who always goes handheld and is like the very opposite. You have Alejandro González Inarritu, who uses very, very wide lenses, while Tony Scott used always Taylor lenses. Or mostly. And then we have Wes Anderson, who shoots everything in a 90-degree angle. Everyone has their own set of rules. They establish them, they follow them, and then by that you know what you can expect. But what do I mean by that? Exactly, stick to your rules. Because like storytelling is selling a fantasy. So the storyteller needs to be believable to convince the viewer that what he's seeing is a true story, that is really happening, and the emotional journey is worth to follow. Therefore, you have your rules. I don't know, if you have a very, very realistic movie, the camera should be realistic, It's you shouldn't do some crazy stuff. And the other way around, if you have a very stylized movie, don't go too realistic. So if you establish your rules and you break them, that's bad, because that's where you lose the viewer. So breaking the laws of physics in a very realistic movie, that could be some kind of a sin. Well, when I did my second movie, which called Hexenjagd, or The Witch and the Ottoman, I had my very own VFX nightmare. And there I learned a lot of things. So this movie was fairly expensive for an independent movie, and it bombed spectacular during COVID. Let's have a look at it. It's some montage from the end of the movie where we have the big reveal and quite some CGI effects. And me, as a co-writer and director, I wanted to shoot as most as possible in camera, but not everything was possible. So let's have a look. All right, so that was some reveal. Our main lady, spoiler alert, is the witch. So to sell that, we needed some sort of special effects, and there was a problem. My VFX supervisor, he wasn't really interested in reality. He was more interested in creating a Game of Thrones style intro, which, fair enough, is quite a cool thing on its own, but it wasn't in our rule set. It would violated the rules we established during the movie to have it based in reality and sell the idea that an innocent woman is chased as a witch, and then have this super crazy reveal that she actually is a witch. So, and we were constantly battling on this set about what to shoot for real, what we can achieve with VFX, and we had all these discussions about these real life examples, like how does stuff look, how does it happen. So, and one of the most funny things we had was when our witch had a very Dutch angle shot, and the dust was coming off not from the ground level, but from the bottom of the camera, which was obviously wrong. So, and therefore we fought a lot, because like I was very much interested in real life references. He was not, and so this was that. But nevertheless, I learned a lot about all these references over there, and I brought a lot of this to my work at Hunt. And what I do at Hunt is like I try to mimic as much real life cameras as possible. I want to sell the illusion that everything is happening for real. Whenever I do a shot, I imagine a camera operator operating a camera. I want no camera move be unlogical, not doable CGI, like even if everything is CGI. So let's have a look at some of my favorite shots from Hunt Showdown.
We always knew they were watching, but they never interfered. Never set foot in the mud. Why now? Why him?
All right. That was that. You can see I mimic all kinds of shots. I mimic helicopters, long lens handheld shots like Peter Brock will do, special camera rigs like the POV, crane shots, and there's a reason for that, because like people grew up on film language. They seen so many movies, they understand what each camera move means, and I can borrow credibility from that. And this helps the viewer to immerse themselves into the trailer and make it feel real. And in the end, this makes this fantasy more believable. But there's one thing totally different. Because like when I was shooting movies, a lot of stuff was about lenses. My favorite tool at the time was my viewfinder, where I could set any kind of lens, any aspect ratio, and just go for it. In game engines or 3D applications, there is sometimes lenses, sometimes FU sliders, and sometimes both. And if you want to do something that feels real and feels based in reality, you need to know what each lens does. So I think it's very important if you try to come up with shots. It's like to study the choice of director's lenses, like from Inaruto's very wide lens handheld shots to Tony Scott's extreme long lenses, and then make the film language your own. When I first started, when I was like, okay, film, maybe my film career is over and I need to go somewhere else, I looked into Unreal. And the first thing I saw was this very interesting thing, because like they put up all the lenses in there. And even if I never used the program before, I had the opportunity to replicate something from my own real life experience. And okay, what happens if I use a 12 millimeter lens or a 200 milliliter lens? So, and this made the gateway for me to experiment and do some stuff. And there's all kinds of things, like Unity has the FOV slider and the physical base camera. And one of my first things I did when I joined Crytek is I created this chart to see, okay, what kind of FOV would be what kind of lens. And I did this once, and I never looked back. But I today, when I looked at it, I just use it all the time. Like that's very important, because if you know what each lens does, and you can bring it to the 3D world, it helps you very, very much to grab the viewer's attention. But another thing I learned on my real-life film experience was working with limitations. And in 2012, I did a short film called The Rising, and let's have a look at that. Okay, so I made this movie at a time when my commercial filmmaking career was really kicking off. So I decided to sabotage myself and do a short film, because, like I said before, I'm a storyteller, and I really wanted to do stories, and I wanted to do something very narrative, not commercial, just pure storytelling. So I grabbed a few of my friends, my director of photography, my sound designer, and musician, and said, okay, what can we do? So and we did this film, and we did it in a shoestring budget. We shot on Red 1 at the time. It was like very, very new, and it's okay. We only have this limited amount of time, and we want the most blockbuster kind of effect we can have. So how can we solve that? Because at the time we shot in winter, it was like minus 90 degrees cold, and we had 6 hours of daylight, and only 5 days to shoot. That's not a lot. So we storyboarded the whole movie, And we realized, okay, if we scram that into a shooting schedule, it's way too long. Then I learned something, which stuck to me. Because if you look at a storyboard and you like do all the shots beforehand, you do all these things you like to see, and you create these shots, and some of them are very necessary and some are not. And then what we did is like we threw out everything that wasn't necessary, and to see, okay, does the scene still work in full effect, or does it lose something? If it would lose something, we would need to find another way. But if the scene would still work, we said, okay, then when we keep it that short, because we shot the movie in 3 or 4 different forests in a non-chronological order, which means that I needed to trust the storyboard that everything would make sense in the end. So we did this, and we shot for 5 days, and I just shot it by storyboard because we didn't have any dialogue, and it worked very well. And we edited the film in just 3 days, which was very sad because like I like to sit in the editing room. And then we had 120 days of VFX work. Because like post-apocalyptic stuff comes with a price, and that price was a lot of retouched stuff and effects and everything. But yeah, I think it was pretty worth it. The movie traveled around quite a lot. We went to the LA Scream Fest. We shot the film at Cannes and in Barcelona, and it was a very wild ride, and I would not miss it. So here's one of the storyboards, and this is very, very basic. But yeah, it worked for us. But also, in preparation, we did something I never did before, and sadly never did after. I looked at one of my very favorite action movies. And maybe you ask yourself what we can learn from Bad Boys 2, and I will say there's actually a lot of it. Because at the time when I was preparing the movie, I've seen the Bad Boys 2 probably 6 times, and I could talk to it and knew everything. So my director of photography and I decided to watch it without sound. And then I understood some things, which I'm going to show you now. So we watch it without sound. It's one of the most interesting scenes in that aspect. Let's have a look. What a great action scene. And I don't know if you noticed, but when I watched the movie first without sound, it really struck me that the scene shouldn't work at all. It jumps from time of day to in all kinds of places, from midday to sunset. It just cuts here and there. And it doesn't matter, because if scene has pace and it has flow and the music is there and you're in the movie, and the rules Michael Bay said, they work. And you can ask yourself, why is that? And that goes back to the very first thing I said. In every real life movie, there are compromises, and even Michael Bay obviously has to make compromises, because if he could, he probably would have shot the whole scene at sunset. But we have daylight scenes graded to sunset, and then we have daylight scenes. And this is something that works. And that moment I realized something, that if I can keep the viewer in the flow, in the movie, stuff can happen. That's not the end of the world. And I still can keep the viewers. So in that case, nothing is really breaking the laws of the movie at that point. Even if it's breaking film rules, so to say, it's not breaking the laws of this movie. And this doesn't mean like you should throw all consistency out of the window, because that would be stupid. But it's important to know, if you can make something only one way, and this is by breaking some film rules, you should do it nevertheless. Because if the flow of the movie is right, and you stick to your energy, and you stick to your flow and your rules, the viewers will follow. And there's an equivalent to that, and I call it emotions beats pixels, because all the time when I do stuff in 3D, there's always a technical aspect to it. And sometimes it's just the assets, like maybe they're just built for game, or they're a little bit older or whatsoever. And then there's the question, okay, can we go this close? Can we show that long? And I have a rule. But let's look at one of my favorite teasers I made a while ago. So let's see what this is.
Don't let them take me.
This was the teaser for Tide of Desolation. And yeah, what do we have here? I would say it's shot real and maybe boring, but I tried to make it human and honest. And therefore, I stuck to the rules. I know about emotions and how you could show that, and when close to the assets, when stayed long, didn't make very complicated moves or whatsoever, and try to immerse the viewer in this whole scene. Because if you, in this very short teaser, can immerse yourself in it, it takes you quite a ride and sets the scene for the trailer, and of course then the game. And my focus is always to be emotion first and technology second, and that by no means mean that I disrespect technology, and I very much need technology. But if there's something to choose, I would always go for the more emotional impact above the technological correctness. And luckily, I'm not the only one doing that. And luckily, there are some really, really great guy who does the most profane camera moves. And it's, if you look at Rango, because Rango isn't shot very spectacular, it's shot like a real movie. And when I saw the movie back then, I thought, wow, this looks not like a Pixar film. And I love Pixar films, but it doesn't look like a CGI movie. It looks like a real movie, but weird. So let's have a look at one of the scenes of Rango.
Hell, I seen things make a grown man lose control of his glandular functions. You spend 3 days in a horse carcass living off your own juices. It'll change a man. Oh, yeah. Got a few extra aces in this deck, gents.
Just the way I like it.
So no, my hirsute little rodent friend, I am not from around these parts. You might say I'm from everywhere there's trouble brewing and hell waiting to be raised.
Yeah, that's that. Rango is a visually very, very dirty movie. And it embraces light and darkness like you would shoot a real movie. And the camera moves you just saw, that's nothing usually you have in an animated feature film. Because like most of the time, the camera goes wild and does some stuff maybe the accurate camera couldn't do. But they decided to shoot it like that. And then in contrast, you have these great action pieces where they go full nuts and do all the crazy stuff. But this gives us a good pacing. So, and of course, like you saw on the very last frame, it gives us memorable hero poses. And this is something very, very close to my heart because the power of the hero pose shouldn't be underestimated. So, and if you look at hero poses, it's often weird, like really, really weird. Because if you remember what a great hero pose could be, it could be something like this from The Rock. Like a guy on his knees doing that with flares. Could be strange. Could feel very strange if you shoot it. And even if you need to film it in slow motion, because then it's just tiny, tiny movement. And I realized that most of the time, these hero poses, like in Man of Steel, or if you look at Top Gun, like all these signature stuff, it's most of the time in the head of the director and the director of photography, because it's a very, very visual, non-narrative thing you could do. And it bends time and it gives you time to think, time to pause, something memorable. And if you do that, and I can say you can often have to fight for it on real film and in digital film if you do it in mocap, because like in mocap it feels even weirder because someone is standing in a suit somewhere. But it's worth it, because if you add this kind of stuff, you make your movie, your trailer, whatever, more memorable. If you can build up in your rhythm and your storytelling and you stick to your rules and have these hero moments, hero poses, you create something larger than life, if that's your goal. But there's also something similar, because like I did a lot of advertising back then. A hero pose is sometimes more like a pack shot. Like you film something in advertising to sell it in the end, like to make it look shiny and good and sellable. And this is what you're actually doing. And this is what we, from time to time, do on our DLC trailers. If we do character trailers, like we do a hero pose. We say, okay, that's the thing. That's what you're getting. But another thing, despite of like real camera moves, is something else, and this involves way more people than me, and it's what we call hunter interactions. This means if people just not shooting each other, if they are touching each other. So let's have a look how this could.
Healing takes time, pain, and sacrifice.
Well, sadly we don't have any killing in hand. I would put it in, but that's what hunter interactions means. It sells the immersion, because if you're just shooting at each other, it's just pixels. But if you have bodies colliding, and this is something I learned when the rise and overuse of VFX happened in mainstream movies in the mid 2010s or whatever, stuff got very, very replaceable. And again, Michael Bay kept it real, and he did in all his Transformers movies, blew some stuff up for real, even if it was full of CGI. And then I realized, okay, we are full of CGI, but let's have our mock-up actors collide. Let's have some physical contact to sell the idea that this is happening. This is a good guy and a bad guy. You can root for one, and something is happening. So we have punching and dragging and sometimes dancing, more punching and a little bit more stabbing and more punching and grappling and eye popping and everything in between. And this, I think, sells the realness of it. The downside of it, that it costs a lot of time to do. And when we did the Murder Circus Encore trailer, we had like 8 heavy hunter interactions, which is, like I said, very hard to do because like you have a lot of movements, possibilities of clipping, animation breaks, and whatever. And but I think it's worth the fight. But what do you do to get this stuff? Because like I said, I was a screenwriter. For 7 years, I wrote several feature films. Some of them were made, some of them were buried, but I did a lot of writing. And at the end of my screenwriting career, I established something which I called the beat-by-beat thing. And I realized I'm not a novelist. So my script should be very, very accurate to the stuff we are going to film. And how do I do that? Well, it's by writing sentences that are single actions. So if I write a single action sentence, you have a picture in your head already. And then I make a break. And there goes the next one. And the next one. And by the time you read this, you have 3, maybe 4, I don't know, but probably 3 pictures in your head. And you know how to do it, how to film it, how to capture it, and to put it in a shooting list. Because like mocap filming is very, very different than real life filmmaking. Because you're only in a mocap studio, you have actors in a suit, so stuff you haven't thought of before is not happening. Oh, I missed that last time. But anyway, so if you write very distinctively what you're going to do, it's very, very easy to put it in a schedule. It's very, very easy for the mocap actors to do because there isn't, I don't know, much novel prose around it. It's just the bare bones thing. And that helps you directing the mocap. Because, like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a child, so to say, of Robert Rodriguez filmmaking. And I do still stuff the mariachi way. And I don't know his great book. It's called Rebel Without a Crew, where he writes how he did El Mariachi for $7,000. And there's one thing that is very, very comparable to doing mocap. Because in Mariachi, or in the book, he describes to spare film, he changed the angle whenever something bad happened. And he made a little overlap, and chose a new angle, and then he edited in camera. And this is combined with the stuff I just said. We see if you have a clear script, and then you go in, okay, let's do it the mariachi way and have a little of overlap on this action to the next action. And you go in and you record all these tiny pieces. It's easier for the mocap actor. It's easier for your room because, I don't know, if your room is super big and you can place all of these super crazy environments there, great. But if not, you have to find a way around because probably your camera looks like that, but the real world set isn't really working in 360 degrees. So you have to know, okay, where to put my actors, where do they do this action, and where can you cut? What are your shots going to be? So it's working with limitation, making them your benefit. And because like in real world, you say, okay, well, let's put it over here or over there. And maybe you waste some time, or maybe you're in a hurry and don't find the right shot. So my advice would always be, come prepared, do the best with your limitations you have, and stick to your rules. But yeah, in preparation for this whole talk, I remembered something else, which I think was had quite an impact on me. And it's called Getting Old with Ninja Assassin, or Why I Turned Down to Work on Inglourious Basterds. I don't know if you know Ninja Assassin, but Ninja Assassin was the second film by James McTeague, who directed V for Vendetta, and it was produced by the Wachowskis. And there you can see me. Yeah, I needed to dig a lot to find a piece of the credits, but yeah, I found it. But what's the story behind it? Because like this screenshot and this movie is 18 years old. It's more or less half of my life. And in 2008, not 18, 2008, I worked as a production assistant on the third unit of Ninja Assassin. I don't know if you know that, but movies regularly have a first unit, which shoots all the story, and then you have the second unit shooting all the action pieces and all that stuff. And we, on Ninja Assassin, we had a third unit, and we just shot leftovers. Just stuff that didn't happen in one unit or the other. And so we did that, and I was a production assistant at that. Like I said, the movie was directed by James McTeague and produced by the Wachowskis. And I had the honor to have lunch with John Gator, who invented the bullet time effect. And I was very starstruck because the guy invented the bullet time effect. And I worked a lot, and it was very, very time-consuming. 6 days a week. At one point, we shot for 2 weeks at night in a green screen studio. I don't know if you've ever been in a green screen studio, but it makes your sense of time is going away, and you lose it. And if you are in a green screen studio at night, it gets very surreal because you go there and it's sun is setting maybe, and then you go out and it's morning. So yeah, we created a blood library, which was very funny because at the time it was apparently cheaper to shoot blood in front of a green screen than create it with CGI. So I was there, starstruck, on a Wachowski set, James McTeague directing, V for Vendetta guy, and I saw myself for a second climbing up that Hollywood ladder. Like becoming assistant director and climbing up and up and up and up and up. And then one night, there was a lovely guy who really protected me, and I sadly forgot his name. And the guy was around the retirement age. And I was sitting there with 20-something, and he was sitting there, and we're having lunch, all soaked in fake blood, in front of a green screen at 3 a.m. And he opened up to me and he said, well, he dreamed of doing a movie of his own. He really wanted to do a movie, and he feared that it could be too late, but he hadn't given up. And I looked at him, and I don't know if he ever did, but at the time I didn't feel like he would ever do a movie, because he got lost in this machine, and he always said, okay, I will do it one day, and I don't think the day ever came. And then something crazy happened, because like right after Ninja Assassin and Inglourious Basterds came to Berlin, and I did at least an okay job, so they asked me to continue working for them. And I said no. I said, no, I'm going to chase my own dreams. And I did that. And I did this for a very long time. I then did The Rising and did the other short films, did my first feature film, and did The Witch and the Ottoman or Hexenjagd. And I stuck to what I think was right, which should be done. Until the point I realized, well, maybe I should change. Maybe there's something else I could do. And then I joined Crytek and starting doing trailers, which I love to this very day. And what's the takeaway of this? So all of my filmmaking rambling and stuff, I think it boils down to some facts. It's like, base your art on real life is the best thing you can do. Come prepared. That's the only way you can improvise. Set your own laws and never ever break them. It's your laws, so I don't know. Set your laws how you like, but stick to them. If you need to choose between emotion and technology, go for emotion. And realize, if you do something and you will never even have enough time or money, or you have the wrong tools or whatever, the grass is always greener on the other side. But this doesn't lead you anywhere. Accept it. Make it your strength. And work with the limitations you have. And like I say, stick to your guts and question yourself, and sometimes we change the direction. Thank you very much. Now we head over to the Q&A section. Okay, Manuel asks, how smooth was your transition from film to cinematics, and how long it took you to jump from one era to another? Well, in the very first 6 or 8 weeks, I produced something. And this was really, really encouraging, because if I look now at the stuff, of course, I think I've grown a lot, but I think it was very, very smoothly. All right, another question. Okay, Manuel, how much get involved with the animation department when making cinematics? Oh, I actually am very involved because I don't do any animations myself. That's nothing I can do, but I work very, very closely with the animators and also on the mockup stage. So when we do something and I go a little wild, maybe someone tells me, but also during the creation of the trailers, I tend to do a very, very rough draft, so everyone sees, okay, that's what I'm aiming for, that's my camera perspective, that's the animation I'm going to use, and then, I don't know, the fist fight is going to happen, and I wanted to show it in that kind of way. So there's a back and forth with the animation department that, okay, maybe it would be easier to change the camera angle slightly, or if we could bring the arm down, I would see more of the face. And yeah, so we have lots of back and forth, and it's always really, really cool to do that. I hope this answers the question. Okay, next question. Do you spend more time in engine experimenting with cameras, angle, lenses, or do you already have a pretty good idea on what you're going to produce before going in? Well, it depends. So sometimes, because like I said, when I write a script, and I write it very visually most of the time, I have some sort of sense how I would like to film it. And I also have established some sort of film grammar, so to say. When I know maybe, okay, I want to do the super wide shot, and on the super wide shot, I want a super close shot. So the experimenting is more or less, I would say, for me, during the mockup because when we're doing the mocap, I get the sense of how the actors interact, how everything feels, and actually most of the time, it's the idea for where I would place the camera happens during mocap. So I go in engine, and sometimes maybe on the location it doesn't work, and then I have to rethink. But more or less, I would say it happens on the day of mocap, and then a little time passes, because data is transferred and everything, and then I put it in engine and say, okay, well, let's try what we saw there, because it's also probably funny because I'm really in the scene. So if we're doing mocap and we have a fake explosion, I'm like really, really living it. Yeah. So I would say the more experimenting is in the mocap phase, and most of the time I know what kind of camera I want to use. I hope this answers the question. Next question. What kind of projects still within the hunt universe would you be most excited to work on? What would you like to explore in it? Actually, with every trailer I do, I try to push boundaries in some sort of way. Be it like this very fistfight stuff or POV stuff or whatever, but what I haven't done yet, and I don't know if I ever can, but I would love to do a two-person talking scene, which builds up the same tension. So I think that would be really, really cool. Yeah. Next question. How does directing actors on a mock-up stage differ from directing actors on a real-world set? Well, I think the biggest difference is that if you're on a real set, I don't know, it's cold, or the sun goes away, or it rains, and it shouldn't. Like in my movie Hexenjagd, there's this one battle scene, which is a flashback, so we could shoot it fragments, but it rained every 5 minutes, and we only had one day there, and we needed to shoot it, and it was lots of practical effects like fire and guns and everything, and it was a nightmare. It was actually it was a nightmare. The good thing is, of course, if you do it on set, that everybody knows where they stand. Like, you're on that hill. Like, not you have to imagine being on that hill. So this needs some training from mocap actors or preparation on my side to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Like, it's that location, and it will maybe that shot, and then we go over there, and then we do that. And so the difference is probably like communicating on a mocap stage what's the surrounding, while on set you're fighting the real world stuff. Hey, thanks for the very interesting speech. Thank you. I hope you liked it. When you work with mocap, what kind of material do you provide them? Storyboard, previous document and preparation, or are you usually present to direct them? Okay. So yeah. First, we have a script. Like the one I've shown, it's not of fun. It's one of mine. But we have a script and we have a shooting list, and then we most of the time have a storyboard or even an animatic. Last time I did a video walkthrough, and I bring this, and then I'm lucky enough to be most of the time there and direct it in person, which has quite a lot of benefits. But I also did it remote over a laptop. That's when you feel like being in Futurama and just a hat on a notebook. But yeah, so I try to bring as much as possible beforehand to then stage the scene just to the requirements of the actual action happening. All right. How do you come up with a story structure for a trailer, and how does this inform the type of shots angle you use? Okay. So usually what's happening is that we have some sort of marketing brief, and then we the story established most of the time through our creative director, and then I often put it into script form. And there's always like one transitioning effect happening. It's like you have this brief, and you have this vision, then you have this actual shooting script. So for me, it's more when I write a script, I think about action pieces most of the time, because like we're doing horror action. And in the last trailer we did, we had a very cool fight in a watchtower where two people are fighting over a table. So, and then I think about it and say, well, okay, never did that. I think would look spectacular. And when I have these centerpieces of what I think is a good visual thing for the trailer, the rest of the script is clicking in. Like, okay, if we want to have them to fight them in the watchtower, we should establish it, and then I go on the location and say, okay, I'm doing virtual location scouting, and say, okay, we have these two towers, but if we use this tower, there's too much water before, so let's use the other one. And by that, it starts to clicking piece by piece. But for me, it always starts with the action I want to see, the hero pose, the centerpiece, and then everything comes after. For you personally, what is the most difficult or time-consuming type of shot scene set? Okay, the most difficult thing probably is if you have to split one action of mocap or one single action into more mocap segments, so to say. Because sometimes, I don't know, you want something to happen, like someone's falling off a cliff, but you should get up immediately. Maybe we can't do that how it's going to be in the trailer, so we have to chop it into pieces doing mariachi way. Okay, saying, okay, this is our beginning, this is our middle, and this is our end. And if these actions are very complicated, like falling off, punching, dragging someone, this can be challenging because most time consuming to get it right, because the viewer immediately sees if something is off. Because like they've seen so many movies, they've seen so much stuff. They know how this should look like, and if you fake it and you make it cheap, you probably will have maybe a laugh at worst, but you want it to be dramatic. So having these split up single action scenes can be very, very time consuming. How much collaboration is there with the narrative department in writing the script for the cinematics, and how much the writers collaborate in directing? Most of the time, we writers for us set all the lore and the tone and everything, and then we set the script on top of it. So it's more like pieces going together. And the intersection is mostly happening in the script stage, so everyone's happy, and everything all works on both ends, so to say. When you take the mocap animation into engine, do you have to do much blending with other animations for final? Blending mocap with your library animations? No, most of the time not. So I would say the 99% of all the trailers I did had mocap solely directed for the trailer. Sometimes I reuse older mocap from other trailers, but or at least I never use game animations, so we don't blend stuff. It's more like that the planning, what we need for the shoot, happens beforehand. And like I said, I spend a lot of time in prepping, and therefore, if we miss something because maybe something new pops up, or something, I don't know, that wasn't planned for, we usually can go to our mockup library and pick something that works. Thanks for the answers. Yeah, I hope I could help you, or it was informative. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening, and yeah, have a nice evening and do some great stuff.
The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of our guests and do not represent the views of any of the mentioned studios.